you.
Cool. All right. So we've been going through Atomic Habits. The first kind of law that we were working with was make it obvious or make it not obvious if it's a habit you're trying to avoid. From there, we went to make it attractive or unattractive. Then we were talking about making the habit easy or making it difficult, if it's something you don't want to do. We are now on making it satisfying or unsatisfying. So the book talks a little bit about it, and those three laws we were discussing before, those are helpful tips to try and do a habit the first time. This is kind of meant to help continue the habit from going and making sure that you are enjoying it at least to some extent so that after you do it the first time, it's something that you desire to do again. Um, I think, yeah, chapter 15 is where we start. Um, and there's one quote that I guess I'll start this chapter on with, which was the problem wasn't knowledge, the problem was consistency. I think most people know like good habits they want to incorporate in their life and bad habits. Very few people are like oblivious to the goals they have. So they know what they need to get done. It's just consistently doing it has always been the problem. I know personally for me, that's definitely been an issue too. So yeah, I like that quote. Anything you
That's
want
good.
to, yeah,
That just makes me think of like weight loss. Like weight loss is super simple, but really, really hard. And like everyone that I see about weight loss knows like everything, single thing that I tell them. Like none of it's new information. But it's like just kind of helping develop frameworks and stuff so you can live by it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah, it's a great example. Love that. A little bit. Chapter 15 also talks a little bit about the immediate return environment, and I kind of like how he broke down like humans and animals just in general. I mean, we're programmed to look for something that has an immediate reward. That's what keeps us alive. That's what makes us procreate. So all these things are what is a reward that I can get right away. So this delayed gratification is kind of a concept I think you're almost fighting with your human nature with when you try to delay gratification, and that's what makes it so difficult. To your point, weight loss, right? Humans have been programmed that calorie dense foods are good because you don't want to starve to death. So you have a shit ton of sugar and a shit ton of fat, and that's something that's pleasing to a human. So it's way harder to have, just the carrots all day long because that is the delayed gratification. Working out is also something that's kind of in that realm as well. Um, and yeah, again, personally, that's always been a big issue of mine is delaying gratification. I love instant gratification, and I've had a really hard time in many aspects of my life staying disciplined. Like I know that's the right call, but it's so easy just to, be on YouTube shorts for another hour instead of getting done what I need to, because it's just so ingrained in my head.
Yeah, yeah. I found that point really interesting. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. And then kind of thinking about good habits versus bad habits, and that bad habits lead to an immediate good feeling. Like you eat sugar and it tastes good immediately. But then ultimately it leads to like a bad outcome, like becoming obese. And then good habits like running lead to an immediate bad, like it's painful to run, it's unenjoyable. But then, ultimately it leads to a good. So somehow like yeah, tricking your kind of primitive brain or like reminding your primitive brain about the ultimate goal rather than like the immediate effect that you have. Um, yeah, that made a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely. I know a extreme example of this too, I think is drugs, obviously, right? Like drinking, cocaine usage, any drug usage, you do have that immediate dopamine response, but in the long run, it's obviously terrible for you. Um, One thing in rehab that is a pretty common tactic is once you get a sponsor, kind of the rule of the thumb is, if you do decide to drink or to drug again, so be it. But you basically have to promise your sponsor that you are going to call them before you end up deciding to do that. So right there, I think it's kind of a good example of make it unsatisfying. No one wants to fucking call their sponsor and tell them that they're about to relapse. But if you make that promise and you want to stick to your word, a lot of the times that alone can keep you from doing it at all. So I kind of thought about that in this chapter. It was a pretty cool example of it.
Yeah, that is a cool example. I mean, I can think of a lot of benefits of doing that. I mean, part of it is that you're just like not lying. You're just like making this like completely open, true relationship with this person and really building a lot of trust. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's it's a cool technique.
Hmm.
Quickly about the point about one cool thing about lifting weights is that this is a good habit that does have an immediate good. Like the
Yes.
pump that you get from lifting weights is like foreshadowing what you're going to look like in like 10 months if you continue to keep lifting that way. So like that's like one really unique thing about lifting weights that you don't get from anything else, from exercise or dieting or any of that stuff. There is no immediate good. But specifically for like weight training, you do get like an hour or two of this like pump that does kind of show you about like your potential if you continue this goal. So that's like one thing that that's extra that makes I think lifting weights kind of an easy thing to like get
Yep.
into. And maybe if you had like a bunch of you had like no good habits and you were like trying to start to build these, that might be one where I would encourage somebody to start because like you're gonna
Oh
get an
yeah.
immediate benefit and ultimately it is still painful. You do get sweaty, you do get tired, so there are all those negatives, but it does help you kind of reinforce more so than some of the other things.
That's an amazing point. I like that a lot. Having that kind of be your foundation for building other habits that maybe don't get that reward right away. Gyms, they have those top lights that shine down, right? To prove that, like, yo, dude, your pump's looking good, the light's looking good. That's a great example, man. Yeah, that's what I think. I've had many times in my life where I've been inconsistent with work or school, but I was able to stay consistent with lifting. And I think that probably is a pretty good reason as to why. Yeah, great point. Cool. Chapter, let's see. Oh, I I do like this quote. I think is that the quote? Yeah, yeah. Eventually the intrinsic reward, like better mood, becomes reward enough. It just takes time. Um, that's I think really hopeful because the tactics of making, something satisfying, um, it seems almost like a little superficial. And it's like, is this something that I need to keep doing if I want to keep doing this habit for the rest of my life? And I found no. Eventually, the habit itself or the action can be enjoyable. Runners do like running. Like they get to a point where you get that runner's high. They actually do enjoy it, and then they get pissed off if they can't run. So the habit is built up enough where the action itself it is satisfying. So I think it's just kind of getting to that point, right, where it's so embedded as who you are as a person that you don't need these kind of like little tricks to keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the graph. He does a cool graph of this where like on the y-axis it would be just like time, and on the x-axis it would be like how much of the habit you do, how many days do you lift in a year, and at some point you pass then on the x-axis going horizontally there's some kind of dotted line, and that's like some threshold, and once you pass that threshold then it becomes a habit and it becomes easy and it becomes something that you enjoy and expect, and maybe you feel bad if you don't get it.
Yep.
So just reiterating what you're saying from a graphical perspective, that makes a ton of sense. That holds true in my own life. I haven't always eaten healthy, but now that I do eat healthy, I feel actively bad if I don't, and I crave veggies and healthy foods, unprocessed foods if I've eaten poorly the last few days. Same with exercise, same with waking up early in the morning. All those things now I crave, and I feel bad if I don't get them. But certainly, was in college, didn't those things were hard. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me. The thing he's talking in here about is like rewarding yourself, reinforcing yourself with for doing good habits that are sometimes difficult, but then just being a little bit careful about what you reward yourself with. So like,
Yeah.
if you are trying to lose weight and you are in a calorie deficit for a few days, then you don't treat yourself by like a
A
really big
donut.
meal. Yeah, a
Yeah.
donut. That's
Mhm.
counterproductive to what you're doing. You treat yourself with like a movie you really like, or going and seeing a friend, or you treat yourself in something that's not counterproductive. So yeah, I mean I think it's pretty understandable. I don't need to give more examples, but that I hadn't really thought about that specifically. Um, but it's something to consider going forward.
Yeah, that's um I mean that's a good point to bring up. A lot of people do that even if they're not aware of it. Um I did that at least with marijuana for a little bit. I was like, all right, I'm not gonna smoke any weed, but to reward myself, I ended up smoking way more nicotine than I had before. So, I mean, while yeah, I was avoiding the marijuana high, I'm replacing it with something that is maybe arguably even more unhealthy. So that's definitely a good point. I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. Kind of a counterpoint though that's coming to my mind now is like, if somebody is like struggling to like not watch pornography, it's kind of recommended that you don't just like stop all masturbation. You kind of just cut out the pornography, but usually continue to masturbate if you want until you're able to cut that one habit out completely, and then you
Yeah.
kind of move on to the next thing. Um, so now I'm
Maybe
trying
just
to
because
sum up these recommendations, but like, yeah, you
yeah,
wouldn't.
stopping something that's that much of a dopamine rush to your system, stopping the entire process is almost, I mean, it's probably overwhelming. So it's like cutting it in small pieces. Like I'm not going to watch pornography, but I'm still going to get the dopamine high of the ejaculation, right? Um, and if I'm doing it 10 times a day, I'm going to try and outcut it to 5 times. And so it's like, I guess, making it in smaller increments.
Yeah, and I guess to the earlier point is that you're not rewarding yourself for not watching porn by like masturbating. You're not masturbating more like as like, oh, I did such a good job. Like I deserve this extra wank. Yeah, you just don't cut out like complete. Sometimes it's really hard to cut out completely cold turkey. So yes, balancing sustainability, but also yeah, not doing things that are counterproductive to your goals.
Absolutely. It's a good example.
That's
Cool.
kind of the main stuff I got from that. I mean, again, it's kind of in so there's 4 steps to habits. There's the cue, there's the craving, there's the action, and then there's reward. Right now, we're focused on that fourth one, the reward, and then how you uh, kind of incentivize yourself for good habits. So make it enjoyable or make it satisfying. And this is kind of just introducing that whole concept. So these next chapters kind of dive a little bit deeper into this topic. Anything else you got from that introductory chapter, Caden?
No, that's, I think, hit the nail on the head. That's perfect. So yeah, let's dive into chapter 16. So chapter 16 is focusing on habit tracking and consistency. So one example it had, and this was like kind of for website building, was a lot of websites and video games do this too. They add a visual element of like a loading bar during like let's say you're loading a new save or you're downloading something. Websites will often have this type of progress bar, right? That you see, and it incentivizes a user from a marketing standpoint to stay on the page. Whereas if that wasn't there, in your head, you're like, how fucking long is this going to take? There's no status update, and then they'll exit. So that I know, at least from a marketing standpoint, really helps retention time. And on a more personal note, I think when you are able to kind of track your progress or your consistency, it makes you feel a little bit better about yourself, right? You and me, Taylor, are kind of talking about doing this cut, right? And you built out this Excel sheet where we're going to set our baselines for 1 month. And then the month after that, we're going to kind of see how it changed and how we improved. I think stuff like that's a really good example, and it's going to keep us more consistent with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out the loading bar example. I guess I didn't even realize that as I was reading this. Interestingly, I just showed you this, but I'm building out this kind of visualization tool for lab results. And one of the bugs that we found is when you're uploading a document and you click upload, we didn't have an error bar or anything. And it was loading up in the background. But me as kind of the beta tester, I didn't realize that. So I like clicked it like 5 times, like waiting, like, did this click or not? I refreshed the page a bunch, like it wasn't working. And then I go in the document center and there's like 5 or 6 of the same documents uploaded. And so we implemented that exact thing, a loading bar, so you know the progress and that you're in the right spot and that you should just be patient and wait. So yeah, that really stands out to me. But yes,
Perfect
I've
time.
kind of noticed this in my life a lot that I really enjoy the progress of tracking things. and having like a to-do list, and specifically like a to-do list where you can check things off the to-do list every single day and you clean out that to-do list. And then retrospectively, you can look at all the tasks that you completed in the last month of last year. I find that really satisfying. And then any big project that I've ever done that's been successful, we relied on a track board, seeing
Yeah.
what's tasks are to do, what's in progress, what is completed. Without those things, it seems really hard to do something complicated and large and impactful. Yeah, so this made a ton of sense to me. I'm not too, I don't do this a ton for smaller things. Like I don't track any of my lifts, I don't track any of my food stuff. I think for those things, those are all already good habits for me. Like I'm an intuitive eater. I eat healthy just kind of naturally now. So I don't think it's necessarily something that's that helpful if you're already doing something that you want to do. I think it's good for things that are like a habit you're trying to build, or again, something really, really complex that's essentially impossible unless it's like really well organized. I think sometimes if you get too granular into tracking every single little nitty gritty thing, you can kind of obsessed with those things. And then the benefit of the tracking is that it's a proxy for your progress. It's like, okay, if I like did these three tasks, then like I'm doing my job well. And sometimes the incentives you can these outcomes that you are using as a proxy for the ultimate goal can sometimes then become the goal itself. Then it becomes like, oh, then I'm like, I just want to increase my weight by 1% this week. So then I'm going to like do terrible form just so I can get that 1% and hit that progress marker. And
Yeah.
that's wrong. So it's somehow like reassessing if the goals are good proxies, sorry, if the outcomes are good proxies for the ultimate goal. And then just being, yeah, careful not to really nitty gritty track everything. I do see a lot of people, and I think people who are more kind of prone to anxiety really get into the tracking, and like, it overtakes their life, and it just kind of drives them further down
Analysis
the.
paralysis, bro. Yes. Absolutely. I'm so happy you brought that up. That yeah, I was gonna touch a little bit on that. There's a quote from this chapter that I notated that's perfect to this. It's when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. Um, and this has happened so often professionally in my career where you'll have an agency come in and they're here to revamp the website, right? And they'll say, you don't have enough people clicking on your CTA call to action, right? So they do all of these different tricks to have the CTA pop up right at the start. And then maybe you also have a pop up while you're scrolling down to do a form fill. All of these different things. And the goal is to have more people get to the CTA. Well, what ends up happening is you have maybe an influx, 100% increase of people get to that call to action page, but you have way less conversions because you haven't prepped that user to want to fill out the form. And so exactly, they'll set this measurement that is, it's good in nature and you do want to increase that, but it can directly conflict with your ultimate goal, which is leads to your fucking CRM, right? Um, so I could not agree more with that. I think that's so important for people to remember. Another really quick thing he mentioned is, someone who has a hard time creating sustainable habits, and I'm one of those people. He says sometimes it can feel like when you also have to habit track, it's almost like you're creating two habits at the same time. And then you kind of get like a little overwhelmed by it because not only maybe are you eating healthy, but now you're also having to count your calories. So it's like two habits in one. Um, so I think for my suggestion would be, maybe start by just doing the habit itself. And then once you're comfortable and you feel like this is something that you can sustain, maybe incorporate tracking a little bit later. Don't feel like it's something that you have to do right away.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I'm having a hard time thinking of any good habit that is like difficult to do like 5 times or 10 times. Like I think anybody can go to the gym like a few times. And so, yeah, to your point, you don't need to start it right at the beginning. The most difficult part is after the 10th time or the 20th time or the 50th time is like when you lose motivation. And I think he talks about this in later chapters, but when you lose motivation, how do you keep up with a good habit? I think that's where this kind of habit tracking can really come in because then then you're seeing the progress slowly week over week, and you're not excited by the novelty, but you're excited then by the fact that you're able to track and you're seeing your progress in the tracking.
Absolutely.
So that's a really good point. I guess I didn't pick that up from the chapter, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah.
A few other things on this chapter that stood out, just quickly on page 201. He's saying that like it's inevitable that you're going to fail, you're going to miss your habit, you're going to bite your fingernails when you're trying not to. Maybe in the context of sobriety, maybe you aren't able to maintain sobriety. It's okay. You're going to fail. The most important thing is that you don't do it twice, that you don't do it two times in a row, that you fail and you get back up. And I think he's talking about um, like professional sports players, and what makes them different than other people is how they respond to failures or injuries or just bad days while training. That's like, I feel like one of the bigger things I'm getting from this book is that don't make failure a trend line. Make it an abnormal data point in your overall trend line that goes the opposite direction.
Absolutely. That's yeah, great point. It's so easy to let that one failure turn into multiple ones because it compounds. And for people that are really momentum based, it goes both ways. And that, yeah, it's a good point about sobriety too. There are so many people that will get in the headspace of relapse, and now they're a piece of shit and they're a drug user, and there is no escape from that hole. When it's they should be looking back and been like, well, I've been sober 2 years, right? And I was able to keep this up for 2 whole years. This is, to your point, such a small data point in the grand scheme of things. But since it's the most recent one, it's that recency bias, right? Of it's the most recent one, so it's the most important data point, when that's really not the case at all. So yeah, love that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to be patient with yourself. Yeah, because if you look back at 100 days of sobriety and one day you weren't able to be, I mean, you're doing pretty well. You're 99% of the way there.
Yeah,
Ultimately the goal is to be 100%, but yeah, you're not a failure by any means.
absolutely. Hell yeah. That was a really good chapter. I think we broke that down pretty well. Anything else you want to add for 16?
Nope, that was kind of it.
Cool. So chapter 17. I don't really have a lot. I think it was a pretty short chapter. This is the last chapter for this fourth law, make it satisfying, and then we kind of get into the conclusion and the wrap up. So this chapter is talking about an accountability partner. I think the call we're having right now is a pretty good example of that. We finished reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We've now finished Atomic Habits, and we are moving to Dopamine Nation. I can say without a shadow of a doubt, if this was something I had tasked to do myself, maybe I would be doing it, but certainly not as quickly. And I don't think it would be as enjoyable. And it probably would, I would have the analysis and the feedback, that we're able to have with each other. So that has helped me a lot with reading, just knowing, all right, Taylor has finished this section of it, and we're meeting this day. Come on, bro, just finish the section. Right. So that has certainly been, I think, a really good tool in building this habit of becoming a book boy.
Yeah, let's just take a step back and think about all the things that apply to reading this book. So I think that's a perfect example about driving habits, because I'm the same way. I maybe would have read half of the Marcus Aurelius book, and then that would have been my reading for the year, outside of like work reading. So this
Yeah,
is way different than what I have been doing, and I'm really enjoying it. But like all four of these steps, we are like manipulating to increase this habit. Like the cue is that like you're hitting me up or I'm hitting you up saying, okay, when are we doing the next book club? So we're constantly like saying like, where are you at? Where's the progress? Like make sure you're getting the reading done. Then the craving is that I get to like see like my best friend and like chat with you about stuff. Like that makes
totally.
reading and talking about reading way more enjoyable than any other
100%.
situation I've ever had reading or discussing reading. And then the actual action, I guess, yeah, you need to do the action in order to have the discussion. And then reward is super satisfying that we're getting to spend time together. We're both learning, we're both growing. And then I guess where does the accountability partner? I guess they're saying that the accountability partner fits in that last part, the reward, making it
Well,
satisfying. I guess that's it.
yeah. I mean, you kind of broke it down. It seems to fit in almost a lot of them. Like you had an accountability partner with the Q because of the text. I have an accountability partner for making it easy because I know I get to hang out with you and talk with you. So the accountability partner, I kind of feel like is ingrained in every single law, if
Yeah.
you incorporate it correctly, right? Um, I think we're pretty fortunate, right, that our accountability buddy is each other and we're best friends. So we enjoy hanging out and talking. I do know some stories of people that will have a sponsor that they don't get along with at all. Like they don't like that person. They don't like talking, but they found that that was a really good accountability partner because they were at least on their ass about going to meetings and going through the steps. So I don't want to like discourage people and say, well, your accountability partner for any habit has to be your BFF. Like, no, I think it just has to be someone that reminds you of these laws and constantly gives you those cues and in some way can make it somewhat satisfying. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Most of my professional mentors are people that I personally do not like at all, and I disagree with about a lot of things, but they push me to the point where I am onto now. Their mentorship and their accountability is the benefit is like I can't explain how like grateful I am for that kind of mentorship and accountability. But yeah, those people are not people that I would hang out with or want to spend any time with outside of that accountability context. Yeah, that's a
Yep.
great point. It definitely doesn't have to be this application, but I feel like this situation is like the best possible one for an accountability partner. I mean, same with the exercise too. I mean, I think you'd be a great accountability partner for that. Yeah, surfing, I have an accountability partner for surfing, and I don't like him very much, but I do like surfing with him. So all we do is we surf, talk about surfing, and outside of that, I don't want anything to do with him. That's another
Yeah,
example.
that's a great example. Now, surfing's at this point probably something you would do with your worst enemy, even though, right? So,
It's not a habit I'm trying to create. It's a
yeah, yeah,
habit I'm
nice.
trying to decrease.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. So,
Um, oh,
kind
another
of
kind of example of this is when I don't do any opioid prescribing, but a lot of doctors who do opioid prescribing, when someone's coming in an outpatient setting, they'll have them write an opioid contract, which is essentially an accountability contract, saying like, okay, I'm only gonna be using like 5 milligrams of Norco per day. I'm only gonna use one per day. Every time I come in, I'm gonna do a drug test, and if I'm positive on any of that, like I won't be able to get prescribed this anymore. You write this whole like accountability contract and you revisit it every single time the patient comes back. It decreases the liability for the doctor, but also it considerably increases the compliance of the person to that risky behavior, which is taking any kind of narcotic. Um,
that's
so
I
that
love to hear.
makes a lot of sense.
And thank you for bringing that up. That's really cool to hear that from that perspective. Because I'll share a little bit about my perspective when you're in group and you're talking to these people. So often the relapse story is I broke my leg or I hurt something and I got prescribed on this medication, and they obviously aren't always honest about their previous drug abuse issues. But I have so many people that's what ended up leading them to relapse. They were addicted to heroin and they've been sober 10 years, but then they break their foot and they think, well, I've been prescribed these perk 10s. So it's something I'm prescribed, so it's good for me. And then 10 months later, right, they're fucking smoking fentanyl. So I think it's really awesome that there are people in your profession that are, kind of aware how a contract like that can at least help that a little bit. Now, for some people, I think no matter what, I mean, if you break your leg, too bad. Like you're unfortunately not allowed to be taking any opioids, right? But for others, there's maybe a little bit more of a gray area.
Yeah, I mean that's my position exactly. I don't prescribe any opioids, any benzos. That there is no condition which I would prescribe those ever.
Yep.
But yeah, other docs are different. Yeah.
Nice.
All right.
Sweet.
So that kind of wraps up then I think like the meat of the book. Then kind of last chapter is or last kind of segment is like
Do you
advanced
want to
tactics.
pause it?
Yeah, I'm just wrapping it up here.
Oh, sorry.
And so the next one is kind of just advanced tactics on how to apply these kind of rules to your life. So yeah, I think with that, we'll end this one and finish it off on the last.
Sounds good. Good shit.